So I think a lot of my previous speakers have made my life very easy in terms of actually giving you details of all that I was supposed to cover. So it makes it quite simple, and I think I can give more time for panel discussion, and I will end my talk in about 15 to 20 minutes at the most. So my responsibility here is actually to very broadly paraphrase in terms of how to keep our health workers safe, and a little bit about preventing hospital-acquired infections or nosocomial infections. Before I go into my presentation, I think it's hugely impossible to thank everybody and every source of information which I have used in terms of putting together this presentation. And hence, I would probably say that with a disclaimer that I thank everyone upfront. And I also would like to tell you that whatever information I have presented is verified and it's authenticated. And some figures and some estimates, etc., which may be there, is probably relevant to the present day context. And hence, it has to be, if you want more recent information, I think it's up to you to actually, make that effort to get the new information. So what I will do is, I will actually take you through the structure of the session in terms of the current context, and all of us have been harping on this current context since morning or since afternoon in terms of really looking at infection prevention and control practices in the realm or in the context of the pandemic. I'll also talk to you about certain broad objectives with respect to health worker safety. I said broad, very broad objectives. Then I'll talk to you a little bit about the measures under each and every objective here. Then a little bit about standard precautions. As you know, probably today they are called standard precautions. When I was a student and a resident, it was called as universal precautions. Then the hospital infection prevention guidelines. Please mind the word guidelines. These are guidelines. These are not rules, or these are not all regulations. Guidelines are guidelines, which means they are adaptable to the context in a broad framework in terms of guidelines. What initiatives have we done as a national entity in terms of the pandemic, and especially in relation to the topic which I'm speaking? This is healthcare workers' safety. And if there are any questions and answers, I'll be very happy to take and answer those questions and answers. I think first and foremost, countries like ours, and especially countries in the middle and low income countries, have this issue with respect to not having sufficient information or data. I think that's one of the reasons why we are not able to put together a lot of policies or programs or interventions with respect to even healthcare workers. As a matter of fact, there is estimation only, and more than estimation, sometimes they are guesses and estimations, or they are guesstimations in terms of saying that we need so many people, we need 1 lakh infection preventionists. Where did they come from? Did they come from thin air? So the point of the matter is the fact that we don't have some sort of a registry. We don't have information with respect to how many people are existing, how many people are capacitated or trained, how many people are actually required, what categories of people, etc. That's because there is lack of information or lack of data. And that data which is available also is probably poor in quality in terms of really having good quality information. Only when you have good quality information, and also information about how many health workers get affected, how many were infected, how many actually got infected at the workplace, how many got infected at the community settings. So this kind of an information is probably very important and key to developing safety and, sort of programs and interventions to protect our healthcare workers. The pandemic has already there was psychological stress. Probably this pandemic has exaggerated mental health issues and psychological stress. So it's compounded that particular problem. I think if you look across the board, and the previous speaker alluded to the fact that her presentation was more psychological in nature. I just have to, agree with her more in terms of saying that health workers probably are at the highest risk of suicides, if you look at it in terms of the mental health issues. what has the pandemic done? It has exaggerated or it has exacerbated the aspects related to the suicides. Apart from that, you have all the physical, biological risks which are already associated with working in an environment, and hence these COVID-19 has further exposed people to and healthcare workers and their families as well to both what you can say as unprecedented levels of risk. I think the risk was there, but this risk is unprecedented. The fact is, it's not only increased, but it has become unprecedented. So that's another thing which has happened. And I don't have to, sort of reinforce the fact that violence against healthcare workers, which was on the rise, has further increased in terms of the fact that there is verbal harassment, there is discrimination, there is physical violence. And the fact of the matter is, I think there is also an issue with respect to consumerism which is increasing, right? The consumerism, which is good, which is a good thing. I think consumerism, expectations of people, expecting something is extremely good when it comes to populations. But at the same time, there has to be certain justified expectations, and there has to be actually expectations which are sort of feasible, practical, etc. to be met. And our legislative sort of protection against violence, especially among healthcare workers, is very poor, right? We don't have strong laws and legislations or enforcements in terms of really making sure that we can prevent violence. Since I belong to the other side in terms of the provider side, I have to reinforce the fact that legislations may be there, but they are not enforceable or they are very poorly implemented. So what do we have here? The issue of data, exaggerated risks, and unprecedented levels of risk, and poor implementation in terms of legislative measures and empowering healthcare workers themselves. So what do we do? If I broadly look at the objectives, I think first and foremost, our healthcare workers need to be protected against both physical and biological hazards. Then they also need to be actually protected against violence. When I say violence, all sorts of violence, it's not necessarily physical violence. We are talking of even violence which is, which can be mental and psychologically inflicted on you in terms of harassment and all those kind of things. To look at aspects of improving healthcare workers' protection through mental health issues or programs related to mental health. Then, how do we advance national health programs? Within the country also, and within our country, we have national programs for protection of occupational health workers, etc. So it's important actually to look at how do we advance them or make use of this opportunity or piggyback on the existing context in terms of really advancing national programs. And not to forget, I think it's very, very important for us to connect the safety of health workers or policies to existent patient safety policies. Why I say that is, many of our policies, many of our institutions, many of our organizations, many of the things which we have work in compartments, right? This is not my responsibility, this is the responsibility of the administration. This is not my responsibility, but where is the coordination mechanism? Where is that linkage, or where is the partnership or collaboration with respect to many of these kind of things? So let me split hairs a little bit in terms of actually going through each and every objective and trying to bring in a certain semblance of what exactly we need to do. So when you are talking of physical and biological hazards and protecting our healthcare workers, I think it's important for us, as mentioned in the previous, by the previous speakers, at least basic minimum patient safety. The IPC sort of systems in place or guidelines which needs to be adopted. Occupational safety standards. I think this is very critical. A lot of things have been said about PPE and its use, but more than the availability of PPE and more than being available, it's also important in terms of training how to use the PPE and how to don and doff and etc. The problem is not with the availability of many things. Like I say, if I'm wearing the mask over my nose bridge, there are quite a few people who wear the mask but wear the mask under the chin. So it's important for us as to make sure that PPE is not only available, but people are educated and trained to use these PPE. Of course, environmental safeguards, it's much broader in terms of really ensuring environmental safeguards. Vaccination, very important, making available, if you look at something like COVID-19, I think the first thing which needs to be done is to vaccinate all our healthcare workers who are at the front line of this particular pandemic. So even if it means that you have a vaccine which needs to be stored at minus 80 degrees or minus 70 degrees, I think the first mover advantage should be given to those people who are at the forefront of this particular pandemic. So whether it is hepatitis B or other vaccinations, etc., it's very important in terms of protecting our healthcare workers with the adequate investments and adequate vaccinations that also have to be given. Then, positive ergonomics, we say in terms of, just like we say in terms of standards and engineering standards, it's extremely important also to look at ergonomic standards. And we need to make investments. There are a lot of facilities, smaller facilities, who have difficulty in terms of making small changes within the place of work, making sure that even to ensure health workers' safety is ensured, investments have to be made. We have to find the resources in order to save our healthcare workers. That is with respect to objective number 1 in terms of physical and biological hazards. Violence, I told you, legislations may exist, but enforcing these legislations there's much to be desired in terms of making sure that they are either implementable, enforceable, or at least you make sure that they are facilitated in terms of policies. Why don't we have a policy called as zero tolerance to any violence, right? So it has to be taken very seriously, and especially violence against healthcare workers, and that has to be, something like zero tolerance. It should be given the maximum sort of penal penalty, if you look at it. Like I said, implementation and enforcement. The other issue with respect to, violence is the fact that most of the violence does not get reported for some reason or the other, and most often than not, it's in terms of the hierarchical system which exists within our societies and also within our hospital environments. Let me be very blunt. I think there exists this hierarchical system in terms of the boss, in terms of the head of the department, in terms of supervisor, etc., etc. And invariably, violence, at least, is hushed up, is brushed under the carpet and doesn't get reported. There have to be some mechanism in terms of people reporting violence. And there has to be a verification mechanism in terms of making sure that this violence is really violence as reported, or it's just somebody trying to play a fast one. I think it's important for us to look at reporting and some sort of a buddy system or an ombudsman system. When I say a buddy system, some sort of a mechanism where people feel free to report about this particular aspect. Right? I don't have to stress the fact that mental health, and at this particular point in time and in this particular context, needs a lot of attention. What can we do with respect to our healthcare workers' protection in this time of the pandemic when it comes to mental health? I think most important is we are dependent on the administration, we are dependent on chief executive officers, we are dependent on managers, etc. Sometimes these managers don't even understand what clinicians undergo. Let me be very clear. I think there are very few people like Dr. Rangareddy who double up both as doctors as well as managers. Most often than not, doctors are damagers, and I don't have to say anything more. But in terms of saying that it's very important that administrative arrangements are made, proper human resources. That's why I said it can't be straight-jacketed, or you can't work in silos, or you can't work in compartments. It has to be an integrated, collaborative mechanism. Social security measures in terms of welfare policies. I just had a message from one of my friends in Delhi who just sent a message just now, 5 minutes ago, which said, the health minister of the country has announced 5 medical seats for those healthcare workers who have passed away as part of their line of duty. Anybody, their dependents or their children will be eligible for 5 medical seats. That's the sort of thing which, in terms of really making sure that there are welfare measures, social security measures, adjustment in terms of work culture, counseling and supportive services. I think this is the time when you need a lot of psychological support in terms of counseling and supportive measures. And not to forget the work-life balance. I think all of us become very emotional when we see people returning from the line of duty to their homes and the children not seeing their mothers for weeks, and those kind of things have happened, and we have testimony to that. I think it's very important to look at this work and life balance as well. Advancing national programs for health worker safety. There exist national programs, and these national programs needs to be strengthened. There needs to be regulatory protection. Labor laws, yes. Labor laws are like a double-edged sword in terms of it can work both ways. So we need to be really looking at regulatory protection, standards, guidelines, codes of practice, very important as well. And like I said, intersectoral collaboration between different agencies. Connecting, health worker safety policies with patient safety policies. They are part and parcel of the same continuum. It's important to understand that they exist at two ends of the spectrum. So why don't we actually, while we are making a lot of effort in terms of patient safety, why don't we link it up with health worker safety as well? So linkages in sort of, where can you make those linkages? Systems which work in quality, safety, infection prevention, control, capacity building, training and education of healthcare workers. Tell me today, apart from the well-trained microbiologist in a hospital or in a community of a public health person in a community, how many of us can actually go and investigate whether it's an outbreak or an epidemic or a pandemic? Do we know whether it exists or not? We are not being trained. I think it's very important actually to build capacity for training and education as well of our healthcare workers. All of you have been inspectors, all of you have been assessors with respect to accreditation institutions. I won't say more about it. Integration of systems, and I told you the first thing about the data availability, data use, data reporting, etc. in terms of a management information system. Of course, a lot of things have been said about standard precautions. I think these elements are already there. I don't have to repeat it again and again, but the importance of hand hygiene, personal protective equipment, cough etiquette, engineering practices, etc. Interventions when you do injection practice or instruments, surfaces, etc. All that has been discussed in detail, and there are very nice posters which are available, which are in the public domain, which you can actually display at part, also train people who are doing healthcare, working at the forefront. And also I want to tell you that there are guidelines available. There are guidelines since 2018, which are standard guidelines of the ICMR guidelines when Dr. Soumya was our DG. There is the ICMR guidelines with respect to hospital infection control guidelines, which have been contributed by quite a lot of people also sitting in this particular room in terms of actually putting together guidelines for infection prevention and control. I think this is my, couple of more slides. During this pandemic, in the month of April 2020, as you can see, the government of India was very concerned about protecting or making sure that the health workers are taken care of, the healthcare workers are taken care of. So in terms of really spending or investing time, energy, effort, etc., although they might have done little, there's a lot more to be done. I think investments were made with respect to human resources, safety of these people, coming up with staffing guidelines and timely payments, very important. It was important. Some governments have had issues with respect to not paying salaries to their healthcare workers, etc. See, unfortunately, the problem is health being a state subject. It depends on every state in terms of how they implement policies, but under the ambit of the National Act or the Disaster Management Act, there is a lot of supersession of powers which the center can do. Staffing guidelines, I told you. Psychological support, of course, a lot of effort was done in terms of providing psychological support. Training and capacity building, a very important aspect related to it as well. I want to end by saying that as much as we have spoken about our safety of our healthcare workers, and I told you about not having, proper estimates or numbers and not even knowing how many people we need to train, between the Infection Control Academy of India and the University of Hyderabad, we have launched a very innovative postgraduate diploma program, the first batch of which has completed term 1, will be completing the second term and the whole course February, March of next year, where those people who are already in service, those people who are working in the area or spearheading or stewarding infection prevention and control can actually undergo this particular program, which is on a distance or a virtual mode, where after your work, after your work in a hospital or after spending time wherever you're working, you can still do this particular program and get a postgraduate program. And more details are available in that website here.